But essentially, when I talk about the Shia crescent, I do talk about a sort of a rainbow from Lebanon that would go through Syria, that would go through the south of Iraq, would then go through Iran, would ultimately go to Yemen and to Somalia, and all of it would be essentially controlled by Iran, which now is incidentally very, very close to having a nuclear weapon. The US and Israel managed to set the country back a little bit. You may have heard about the Stuxnet virus, which was a virus that was developed by the US in conjunction with the Israelis in a location here in the US where Siemens supplied the equipment that they were trying to attack, and where they found a way of developing a virus that attacked the centrifuges that are being used for the development of nuclear fuel in Iran in a way that they spun out of control. But in the meantime, there was a sort of a false picture that was given to the control screens that showed that everything was in order. That apparently worked pretty well. It worked sufficiently well to set them back maybe a year or so. But it doesn't really mean very much, because it is only a question of when, and ultimately the Iranians will have a nuclear weapon. And when they do, then I think talking to them or with them is going to be an entirely different matter. Just imagine how different it would have been to talk to North Korea about the sinking of a South Korean Navy vessel if North Korea had not been in possession of a nuclear weapon. So very quickly, Iran currently is between sanctions and progress. The sanctions are less and less effective. Progress is speeding up. And I think within a year, Iran will be able to announce that they now do have a nuclear weapon. Syria is currently in the middle of a brutal suppression of the uprisings there. The revolution has spread already from the south to the north. Ultimately, this will lead to an end of Assad's regime, but the way the people there have been treated, the way the security forces have been shooting down demonstrators in the streets, this could be quite a while yet. Lebanon is essentially today controlled by Hezbollah. The forces of Hariri, of Prime Minister Hariri, no longer have much to say in that government. Bahrain has become a key pawn in the battle between Saudi Arabia and Iran concerning superiority in the region. Saudi Arabia itself has reason to fear that there are a lot of forces and more directed against the House of Saud. In particular, they have to worry about the Shia population that is in the east of the country, which is the area where most of the oil is being produced. And the Shia population in the south of the country is mainly tribes that have caused a lot of problem in the past. And then finally, Yemen is about as close as you can come, I think, to a failed state. The problem with Yemen is that if the current government is deposed, then the country will fall apart. It will fall apart pretty much like Lebanon did at one point, and it will become pretty much ungovernable. I think it will fall apart into various pieces. And then finally, it's not necessarily geographically part of the region, but I think in this context one needs to spend at least a few words on Turkey. Turkey has more and more shifted away from the West. It is still a member of NATO, but it has shifted more and more away from the interests of the West in pursuit of its own interests, which are regional more than Western. It has been rebuffed by the European Union for so many times and for so long that in Turkey right now you get a very distinct feeling that they no longer care. They no longer really want to be part of the European Union. And I think if you were to have a referendum today, the answer would probably be no. Increasingly, they are trying to build up what they think is their main asset, which is the ability to be a bridge to Central Asia, to the countries like Azerbaijan, Turkestan, that in many cases are future very important providers of oil and gas to the world. Turkey has a very solid economic record, and this record is most likely going to help the AKP, the party that is that of the current Prime Minister, to win re-election later this year. What I do find in Turkey is that the current government has very distinct autocratic tendencies. It has become very dangerous in Turkey to publish material that is critical of the government. You get sued for enormous amounts of money. Your editors might wind up in jail. You might find yourself without supplies of paper. Suddenly cannot publish your paper anymore. So in other words, there are autocratic tendencies that are trying to suppress democratic trends, trying to suppress what is essentially been a secular country and shifting it increasingly in the direction of an Islamic country. I would call this creeping Islamization, what is currently going on in Turkey. And that is, of course, something that we do need to watch, because Turkey is such an important country in the region. It is probably the biggest loss for Israel that they have lost the support of Turkey. That used to be a very close relationship. The security forces in Turkey and in Israel used to work closely together. No more. Since the Freedom Flotilla tried to reach Gaza not long ago, and the boarding by Israelis resulted in the deaths of some Turkish civilians, since now they are trying to organize a new such flotilla, Turkey is really no longer on the side of Israel. Turkey has become very, very critical of Israel, and that is probably for that country one of the biggest losses it has had. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans.